Hey good people, and welcome back to the channel. It's a wonderful Wednesday, and I'll be sharing my thoughts and feelings on episode 11 of Married at First Sight San Diego. Now I know that many of you out there are done with watching the show, and you have every right to be. This season has proved itself to be trash very early on. But as the saying goes, one man's trash is another man's treasure. So for this review, it'll be my plan to attempt to salvage this mess of an episode and give you a fair and balanced perspective on the happenings for the episode. I'll begin this review with an episode breakdown, followed by my thoughts on the cast members, and I will end this review with an overall rating, as well as my results for Married at First Sight Bingo. So without any further delay, let's jump right in. Now this episode is broken up into 3 parts. The first part involves the group talking about Binh and Morgan's separation. The second part involves Dr. Pepper meeting with the couples and giving them mostly useless advice. And the third part involves the cast members sharing their childhood experiences with each other and writing letters to their younger selves. Now, if I had to give a recommendation on whether you should check the episode out or avoid it, then I would say that you should probably treat it like a bill collector and avoid it altogether. In my opinion, this episode shares recycled issues from previous episodes, as well as a lot of filler with this homework assignment. And as I talk about the couples for this episode, I won't even bother talking much about the filler scenes. Instead, I'll just talk about the important happenings. So towards the beginning of the episode, all the ladies meet up with Morgan and talk about her issues with Binh. Keep in mind that Morgan is talking about Binh behind his back instead of addressing her issues with him face to face. But during this conversation, Morgan reveals that she and Alexis had been talking, and that caused Morgan's spider sense to tingle like crazy. And this was because she knew that in her heart of hearts, that Binh was lying about something. We don't really get to hear what Binh might have been lying about, but Morgan expresses her issues with Binh talking to Justin behind her back, and she claims that she just doesn't know who Binh really is. In my opinion, the two of them had only known each other for 24 days at this point. Of course they don't know who each other really is, but they should still extend some grace to one another in my opinion. But I digress. Morgan later shares that she moved out of the apartment and she feels some way about Binh not reaching out to her after she decided to leave. Now what in the hell was Binh supposed to say to somebody who clearly expressed that they don't trust him, or to someone who won't let him get a word in? But on a side note, Morgan was completely melodramatic during the scene, which unfortunately is a point on my bingo scorecard. The last point that I want to make is that all the ladies heard Morgan's thought process through all this foolishness, but only Krysten seemed to be the neutral party in all of it. In another scene, we see the men meeting up with Binh, and he shares his side of the story, which was that he definitely talked to Justin behind Morgan's back, and he lied to her. But this was because he found it tough for him to get a word in when they argued, and because Morgan is unforgiving. Now in my opinion, there are different levels to lying, and while Binh may have technically lied to Morgan, the type of lie that he told was done for a justified reason. For example, when a woman is approached by a sketchy man in public, he asks for her number, and she lies about having a boyfriend, it was still technically a lie that was told, but it was told for a good reason, and it should not be a strike against her character. What I liked about the scene was that all the guys seemed to be supportive of Binh, and they acknowledged that his decision to talk to Justin about his issues was somewhat justified, considering the process that they were going through. What I found sad about this scene was that Binh reveals that he lost 7 pounds from stress, and I can definitely see it. We then see the ladies crash the men's meeting, and it doesn't take long for the men to create some conversation about Morgan and Binh's marriage. Miguel then takes the lead on these questions because he's pretty good at getting into everybody else's business. And during this time, Morgan essentially calls Binh a hypocrite for having a strong stance on lying, but then he told several lies. Through the back and forth, Nate eventually cuts through the BS, and he tries to reason with Morgan. But Morgan is standing firm in her beliefs that Binh was 100% wrong and she was 100% right. Binh then falls on his sword yet again by accepting full responsibility for his actions and admitting that he signed up for therapy. But did Morgan accept any responsibility for her part in this foolishness? Of course not. What I found disappointing about this scene was that we didn't get to see Alexis or Justin get put on the spot for their role in this mess. But here's how I feel about it all. First and foremost, I think when it's all said and done, Binh is a nice guy. He may lack experience when it comes to dealing with women. He may have had some issues when speaking up for himself, but at the end of the day, I truly believe that his heart is in the right place. I also think that Binh had no business being matched with Morgan. In my opinion, for someone like Binh to have success on the dating scene, he needs to be with somebody who aligns with his beliefs and values. This means that he needs to find a woman that is okay with being thrifty and someone who can provide a safe space for him to be his authentic self. Because let's face it, in the million times that Binh has apologized to Morgan throughout the past 4 episodes, I can tell you that after the first few apologies, the authenticity behind Binh's words started to disappear, and it seemed like Binh was simply doing whatever it took to get Morgan to stop projecting her past traumas onto him. I think we can all agree that there's no reason why a man or a woman should have to jump through any hoops or hurdles just to be in a safe space to communicate with their significant other. On the flip side, I don't think that Morgan is a bad person, but her need to be in control, her need to avoid accountability for her issues, and her need to be right all the time will push most guys away. In my opinion, the only type of guy that would stick around and happily remain married to Morgan would be the typical beta male that gives their woman 100% of whatever they want and never holds them accountable. It seems like Morgan wants to train her man to not only do whatever she wants, but to also behave in the manner that she desires. And if that man were to offer any pushback to her, then she will challenge him and make his life as miserable as possible until he skips out on her or he capitulates to her will. And this likely explains why she's been single for so long. Don't get me wrong, Morgan has every right to want what she wants and like what she likes, but she's definitely not entitled to the outcome that she wants. But since we're on the topic of Morgan and Binh, we might as well use this time to talk about their progress over the course of this episode. Later on, we get to see Dr. Pepper meeting with Morgan and Binh. But prior to Dr. Pepper coming over, Binh and Morgan are in the apartment, they're not saying a word to each other, and the tension is so thick it can be cut with a knife. So Dr. Pepper comes in, and we get more of the same with Morgan and Binh. Binh admits to being overly judgmental, insensitive, and that he lied because he was scared to talk to Morgan. Morgan acknowledges that she possibly could have handled things differently with Binh, but when he lost her trust, all bets were off. Throughout this whole scene, it seems like Dr. Pepper was giving Morgan a pass for her antics, and her advice to them was to write a letter to themselves when they were kids and read the letter. Now, while Dr. Pepper may believe that this is a good exercise, I truly believe that this was dumb advice, due to the history of Dr. Pepper giving the same assignment to several cast members from past seasons, and the advice not making much of a difference with the couples. So that's one point of my bingo card. Towards the end of the episode, Morgan and Binh meet up to read their letters to each other. Morgan allows Binh to go first, and he bears his soul in his letter. But when it's time for Morgan to share her letter, she tells Binh that she doesn't feel comfortable sharing her letter with him for fear that he may use it against her later on, and she walks off without further incident. Now, first off, my question is, why couldn't Morgan just call Binh and tell him that over the phone? My second question, again, why couldn't Morgan just call Binh and tell him that over the phone? At this point in their journey, it seems like Morgan is a professional victim, and she tries to drag Binh down with her in the pit of misery. Binh just needs to ask for a divorce ASAP, because at this point Morgan is just a nutcase. But let's move on to Stacia and Nate. When Dr. Pepper meets up with them, she asks them if anything has gotten in the way of their marriage. Stacia finally admits that she was moving too quickly with Nate, and it seems like she's acknowledging her own issues. Nate was also great at acknowledging his own issues with communication with Stacia. Now, this is when Dr. Pepper actually gives some good advice in encouraging Nate to be an active listener, and she also encourages them to hold hands when having tough conversations with one another. Now, at this point in their journey, it's still very hard to see how Stacia and Nate did the complete 180 from 2 episodes ago. Maybe Stacia allowing Nate to give her that good old pickle tickle really turned the tide in their marriage. I know that it gave me a point on my bingo card. Stacia and Nate then have some touching scenes as they talk about their childhoods, but at this point in the show, it seems like Stacia and Nate have a pretty good chance of making it past decision day and strengthening their connection. Next up is Krysten and Mitch. They meet with Dr. Pepper to discuss the issues, and I was proud of Krysten for coming clean and speaking her mind. Krysten admits to overcompensating in her marriage to make Mitch happy, and she admits that she doesn't want to do that anymore. I was a little disappointed with Dr. Pepper encouraging Krysten to figure out Mitch's love language, because at this point, Mitch really hasn't proven that he's worth the time or energy to find any of that out. But Dr. Pepper then asks Mitch to say a few nice things about Krysten, and Mitch starts off great, but then he turns the conversation on himself, which was a head-scratching moment. Nevertheless, I marked 2 points on my bingo card, 1 for Mitch saying something dumb, and 2 for Krysten speaking her mind. Next, we have Alexis and Justin. When Dr. Pepper meets with them, Justin immediately tears up, which was a point on my bingo card. We learn that Justin's dog Maya has been acting a fool in doggy rehab, and she's just not ready to be released back into society. Justin is sad about this, but I really can't feel sorry for him. Maya's behaviors were not some overnight thing. This was years in the making, and it's sad that it took a doggy attack on TV for Justin to get Maya properly trained. But during this meeting with Dr. Pepper, Justin calls Alexis out for being sensitive, and Alexis confirms that she is hesitant to share her sensitive side because she's afraid to be vulnerable and give people power over her. In my opinion, it would be hard for Alexis to have any meaningful loving relationship without her being willing to open up. Now, what I did find interesting was that when Justice was telling Alexis about his childhood and the story about flying kites, Justin brought a kite with him to fly, and Alexis was completely disrespectful about the gesture during her production interview. In my opinion, it seems like Alexis wants the power to be disrespectful and hurtful to others, but she doesn't want to give that power to anybody else to hurt her. But lastly, there's Miguel and Lindy. Dr. Pepper meets up with them, and I gotta be honest, it seems like Miguel and Lindy have been holding back their issues while giving the audience the perception that they're completely happy with one another. I mean, to Lindy's credit, she did mention that she had problems getting defensive whenever Miguel gives her advice. But if I had to compare this couple to any couple from past seasons, I would say that they remind me of Jessica and Austin from season 10 DC. Because we definitely know that they have some issues, but it seems like they're not trying to show those issues for the camera, which is within their right to do so. But for the remainder of their scenes, they go on a romantic date followed by doing their homework assignment. But overall, on a scale of 1 to 10, I will give this episode a solid 3. It definitely felt more of the same, but it was nice getting to know much of the backstories of each individual participant, that is, everybody except Morgan. My bingo card failed to save prior to this review, but I had about 9 spaces that were marked, yet no bingo. So this marks the end of my review. If you have any questions or comments about the review or the episode, feel free to leave them below in the comment section, and I'll be sure to reply to each and every comment. Until next time, stay tuned and stay safe. Peace.